Let's talk about chapter 3 of the Dao De Jing, specifically the section Shu Qi Xin, Shi Qi Fu, void the heart and fill the abdomen, void the heart and fill the belly, however you like it. And today we are going to talk about this in the context of Taoist internal practices for health and for meditation. So this video project is called 81 Months of the Dao De Jing. And effectively, what it is every month for 81 months, we will look at the total consecutive 81 sections of the Dao De Jing. This very important early Chinese philosophical text, Taoist document, right, the first of the Taoist documents, so on and so forth. Now, generally, we are looking at this from a number of different perspectives. The main perspective is to try to understand the actual meaning of the article in question. And the reason for that perspective is because in the past, people have approached me and said, there are so many translations of the Tao Te Ching out there, which one should I read? I really don't know, but what I do know is that today there are an overwhelmingly large amount of Chinese language resources, some of which are ancient, or I should say medieval resources, which are commentaries on the Tao Te Ching that we can use to understand what people thought about it historically. And some of them are present day resources written by scholars in a number of different contexts. And so my thought in making this project was perhaps we should have a look at a number of different Chinese language sources that are either scholarly and authoritative, or come from interesting practitioners, or are historically meaningful. In my opinion, the Tao Te Ching shouldn't be reduced just to its meaning at the time it was written, but instead its overall contribution to Chinese civilization in general, which means that we can view it through a number of different lenses and we don't get stuck on one authoritative interpretation. So that's the first reason. The second reason for undertaking this project is because I'm very interested in the utility of Taoism as it is related to internal health practices and as it is related to Chinese cultural arts, and indeed as it is increasingly related even to cultural practices and thought of the West. So, in that regard, it is important to look at how the Tao Te Ching has been used as a manual of study for people in different types of practices. And probably the most famous one associated with the Taoist tradition is Yangsheng, or internal health practices, right? Nourishing life practices. These practices often involve arts of breathing and arts of stretching the body, rotating the body, etc., or in some regards, meditation, right? And so, uh, in that, that's a very important interpretation of Taoism. Many people in those arts from a long time ago, very close to the time the Tao Te Ching was written, actually, began to invoke the Tao Te Ching and its principles within the context of Yangsheng arts. Now, I would argue personally that Chinese health arts probably predate Taoism somewhat, or even significantly. The legendary founder of Chinese health arts is Pengzu, who is said to have lived before Lao Tzu. But I think that we can consider this broadly to be a legend. However, the import of the legend is that perhaps people have been doing these things for a very long time, and Pengzu's reputed longevity and ancient status is also a way to explain that these are cultural arts that have been around in China since before anyone's recollection. Okay, so probably in terms of Taoist Yangsheng health practices, one of the most important lines in the Tao Te Ching is the one which you see on your screen, assuming that you're looking at the screen. It is 虚其心, 实其夫. Okay, so 虚 means to be empty. Qi means like it, basically. Xin means heart, so empty the heart or void the heart. Shi means to fill. Qi means it. Fu means abdomen. So empty the heart and fill the abdomen. Now, in the first video that I made about chapter 3 of the Tao Te Ching, which I published earlier this week, um, you can have a look and see that my interpretation, anyway, is that this is not about really meditation or well being practice. It's uh, what it's trying to say is that the leader of a society should make it so that the people are ignorant and well fed, right? These are the primary sort of ideas. I think that's probably the original idea in the Dao De Jing. And many contemporary scholarly sources that I've looked at are of that opinion, and they're using rather a lot of historical proof to get there. But having said that, a major interpretation in Taoism has also been about doing certain practices to calm your mind and to fill your abdomen with breath. And so this is what we will talk about today. And we will talk about the two uh, major schools of thought that invoke this concept in the Taoist world. So, chronologically, the earliest one is a school of thought which many people call Tuna, but it could go by other names too. Essentially, it's a school of breathing practices. So you would undertake certain types of breathing practices in order to fill up your abdomen with breath. And then the common belief was that if you filled up your abdomen with breath significantly for long enough, it would reduce the amount of food that you had to eat. So you could fast, and then you would clarify your body essentially as a result of not bringing more toxins into your body with food, and as a result of getting the fresh air from the environment, which would theoretically mix with the physical body in order to fortify it. And so these practices of breathing rely especially on the concept of shi fu, right, to fill the abdomen. But I think of particular interest is that they also rely on the concept of shu qi xin, or emptying the heart. Now, there are a number of different thinkers in this genre, but it's a very, very old genre. And so it's not the same as some later genres where you have definitive names behind every document that was written. A lot of the documents are received, even at the time that they were published into the sort of the Chinese literary landscape. And so what I mean by that is that there are many compendium documents with large groupings of breathing documents, one of which is called Yangxing Yanming Lu. So Yangxing means to nurture your innate nature or nurture your mind, essentially. And Yanming means to extend life. So the basic idea in that text is that when sorry, I should say it borrows a number of different old documents which predate the author, Tao Hongjing, who was approximately in the northern and southern dynasties period. It was 1500, 1600 years ago, approximately. Um, he brought together a lot of earlier documents from the Han Dynasty, and some of which were breathing documents. And the breathing styles presented in that text are numerous, and there's various different kinds, but approximately they follow two main models. So one model in contemporary times, Chinese medicine Qigong practitioners call it the Na model. So Na means to pull something in. So this would be a model in which you would inhale, and then you would keep the air inside of your abdomen for a certain period of time, right? So hold the breath for a certain period of time. And this was believed to fill up the body essentially with qi, right? So if you want to understand the concept of qi, if you go down to the very basic level, qi basically means air, right? It basically means like the material inside of air. It can refer to clear air, like qi, they call qing qi, right? Clear air, or turbid air, right? Zhuo qi, so air that is turbid in some way. And it's commonly conceptualized that this very subtle material in the air, which is either clear or turbid, has a very direct relationship with your body. Of course, this was used in later generations in Chinese medicine to harmonize with the idea that oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged in the blood flow, right? So it's a very powerful idea. It's a philosophically kind of general idea. One of the things that we find that's really interesting about Chinese philosophy is the generality of it allows it to be quite in harmony with many different schools of thought. And so this idea of bringing in clean qi into your body and containing it there essentially was about filling up the body with this healthy qi, and eventually this would establish a kind of circulation of energy in the body. The interesting principle of it at the time of Tao Hongjing was that a lot of the breathing methods involved breathing into the upper abdomen. And so you would breathe into the upper abdomen, and the breath would be held there or with the attention behind the umbilicus approximately. But it didn't have the lower abdomen breathing to the same extent that we see in later generations, like in internal alchemy and these kind of schools. Now, having said that, the basic conceit of these practices that eventually, when the breath is held sufficiently on the upper abdomen, it will cause the lower abdomen to also fill up, and the entire abdomen will become full of breath, essentially. And that this would lead to something called taixi, or embryonic breathing, right? So this is sort of the this na approach, this bringing in the breath approach, is approximately um, how you would begin going toward embryonic breathing in the context of those very old Taoist practices. Now, in those texts, they specifically warn, they say you have to keep the mind calm and not use too much strength, right? So this is the shuxian, right? Empty the heart approach. It still favors that idea because they come to the rightful conclusion that if you use excessively strong breathing methods and you're tense, then you're likely to get hurt, right? So this is their basic idea. Even that far back in history, right? They still follow Lao Tzu's idea of being achieving the utmost of softness of the chi, right, or the utmost of softness of the breath, and becoming like a child. So their kind of concepts are perhaps older cultural practices, which maybe even predate Taoism, but they bring the Taoist idea into it in order to inform them in some way. So this is one sort of normative understanding of Shu Qian and Shifu, with the Shifu filling the abdomen, seen as the forefront, and the Shu Xian, or the empty the heart, sort of seen as the afterthought. The internal alchemy school of meditation is reverse to this. It kind of puts the emptying the heart part at the front and the filling the abdomen part after the emptying the heart part. And so what I mean by that is that the practice of the internal alchemy school tends to view this from the perspective of taking very, very slow and very subtle and silent breaths, which are able to the feeling is that they penetrate all the way down to the lower abdomen, and the lower abdomen can be felt to expand on the inhalation and relax on the exhalation. But the breath is able to penetrate down to the lower abdomen because of the softness of the body, the softness of the intention, and this leads to the ability of the mind to become profoundly peaceful, profoundly dark, and for practitioners to enter into a state of stability or even self-forgetting, where the energetic apparatus of the body, or I should say the physiological apparatus of the body, undergoes a very particular change and generates very positive feelings in the body, which then can be augmented in various ways and can be used to assist people to go farther in their practice and to get closer to the ultimate goal of internal alchemy, which is spiritual transformation. So, in that regard, emptying the heart is put at the forefront of this equation, and filling the abdomen is an important part of the practice. So, it's almost inverse to the initial sort of earlier interpretation of this. I'd just like to also take a moment to point out that the idea of fu, or abdomen, is not exclusively the upper or lower abdomen. To me, because I'm not a sinologist, and so I don't work in a linguistically incredibly sensitive way, I'm not capable of that. Then I'm not completely sure of when this came into Chinese thought. But certainly in modern China, the abdomen is split into approximately two quadrants. One is um, the shangfu, the upper abdomen, and one is the xiafu, or xiaofu, right, the lower abdomen. So basically, this abdomen is split into two halves, which are separated at the umbilicus. This is how people think today. And the upper abdomen, of course, is more containing the gastric system is really predominant there, and then the lower abdomen. But you get the idea, right? So different parts of the digestive system. But in the time of the Dao De Jing, I don't think that that was in practice. And during the period of the development of these meditation systems, it may have come into practice. One thing I can say for sure is that this passage, Shu Xian Shifu, is actually directly quoted in a number of texts about these practices. So Wu Zhenpian was commonly agreed on as the first most standardized internal alchemy classic, actually literally takes these words and puts them right in the middle of the text. It's a very important section of the text. So that's quite meaningful and interesting because we can come to understand that in the context of Taoist practice, they really do look back at the Dao De Jing quite often. Now, this isn't universally always the way it is, because some people place more value on the Qing Jing Jing, the clarity and stillness classic, rather than the Dao De Jing. But broadly speaking, everybody more or less gets all their original ideas from the Dao De Jing. Okay, so you have these two different approaches to practice, but are there any others, right, in terms of breathing? I would argue that maybe breathing is largely bound within these two sort of traditional Taoist approaches when we think about shu qin shi fu. But if we're thinking about application, this could be a martial arts idea, for instance. You do see this come up sometimes in martial arts text, and it can have various different meanings. But basically, shu qin would typically mean to calm or empty the mind of thoughts, and then shi fu, to fill the abdomen, would typically mean to activate the abdomen in some way. But that could be activation through movement. It doesn't necessarily rely on activation through breathing, right? So when we read texts like the Dao De Jing, not only should we be aware of their initial philosophical interpretation, but we should also be aware of the importance of how they've been applied throughout Chinese history, and then also in our more recent times, with perhaps within our own cultures, if we happen to not be Chinese, such as in my own situation. And so, in that regard, we can come to not only an understanding of the base meaning of the text, but we can also come to the level of cultural appreciation and perhaps application of some of the ideas in our own lives. I use the shu qi xian shi qi fu concept every day in meditation. Now, my preference is to practice internal alchemy. I don't like the older breathing arts as much, but nevertheless, I'm interested in learning about both because um, they both have had a profound impact on Taoist practice and more generally the kinds of arts that I'm interested in, like meditation, Chinese internal martial arts, et cetera, right? So they're all coming from common sources, and by understanding the source and looking at its application throughout history, then we are able to enrich our lives, which is one of the things I hope to be able to assist you with throughout this project of 81 months of the Dao De Jing. So I will digress for now, and then I will come back next week with another video looking at chapter 3 from another perspective. Okay, see you soon.